Welcome everybody to Reel Wake Up. I'm Dean Val here with Dean Kevin. And also we have Ronald and Peter joining us today. And today's movie is Groundhog Day with Doyle-Murray. And we're going to be discussing it multidimensionally, not just one-sided, one-dimensional literal way, but we're going to see a lot of aspects, a lot of ways to view what's going on here with what they're showing us in these movies. A weatherman is reluctantly sent to cover a story about a weather forecasting rat, as he calls it. This is his fourth year on the story, and he makes no effort to hide his frustration. On awaking the following day, he discovers that it's Groundhog Day again, and again, and again, and again. Somebody figured how many days he was there. Some statistical kind of nerdy guy I saw on the Facebook. Anyway, it was like, how many days he was there. But he was there a lot to gain experience. That's for sure. He got a lot of experience in being in the now, basically now, but using different, having different routines in this now experience. First, he uses this to his advantage. Then comes the realization that he is doomed to spend the rest of eternity in the same place, seeing the same people do the same thing every day. So it was a fun movie. Again, we talk about living in the now. Well, he was basically in the now, but he was like, he didn't recognize he was in the now time frame, now reality, but he was going through different experiences within that. And that's kind of what we're doing here in the simulator. We're going through different experiences, but it's always now. So you'll see as we talk about it how this works and how his experience went. So I'll give it over to Kevin. You usually have something fun for us to work off of.
The movie Groundhog Day would begin and have us introduced to the main character, Phil, the weatherman. He would be, as the vast majority of individuals are in creation, one-dimensionally focused and personal self-immersed. Generally, this becomes the case with all individuals, as the real awareness that every individual actually is, requiring to recognize the isness that it is a part of, must create vehicles, body types, that through the ideas that are installed in the consciousness, which is like the data storage area for a computer game, so do the mechanics of the body vehicles then decode and perceive this virtual reality, holographic-like game simulation that is effected. And the idea being that the comparison that everything creational provides then allows this is recognition, a means of recognizing something by comparison to that which it isn't. For this is indeed the purpose of the simulators, of creation, as a vast multi-dimensional training ground, where real awareness initially has its direct connection with the body vehicle it animates. The real awareness nowness state is maintained, as the real awareness is this isness reality, and so is a state of just being. All very well and good, but the real awareness is all about the recognition of this isness, and to remain in this being isness state has it no closer to doing so, and were it then just to retain this nowness position and sit in the body vehicles, the real awareness may as well have remained where it was, with the ears, and not encasing itself in creation. But the initial simulator body forms have a certain consciousness karma granted them on entering the simulators, which then has effects generated from it that move the body forms through their progression, from rocks to plants, insects to larger animals, that were it not for such a karmic package, then nothing could be effected from it, and nothing would actually happen. It would be like a huge computer game that just sits there, without any files or data added to it to get it started. For it is the consciousness that effects the simulation, and so it follows that initially, when a simulator begins, so must the very first consciousness vehicles have this karmic package, ideas already installed, that not only affect the body types, but the environments, the various dimensional life levels that spin off from the 5 aspects of the created self, that affect the 5 corresponding life levels. At a certain point, this progression leads to a body type where additional faculties of the created self are utilized, the literal mental parts of thought and consideration. For up until now, the animals had just maintained their nowness states, with the real awareness connections maintained. But anything that is activated, created through the body vehicles, the emotions, mental thoughts, etc., must effect the corresponding illusions, must have the nowness state momentarily stepped aside from. For anything that is created has the cause to effect mechanic applied, and as anything created, anything generated through the personal self vehicles cannot be the isness, nowness state of the real awareness, as anything added to a state of everything is, must be an encapsulated experience aside from the isness true reality. Again, not really an issue, for just as we activate through the personal self, we can just as readily return to the nowness of the real awareness position. What tends to happen is that the personal self becomes overutilized, and then becomes rather an awareness split in a sense, where a personal awareness is developed, that becomes lost in the illusions of its literal mind and emotions. And as lifetimes roll by, as further body forms are assumed, still with the literal faculties available, so the personal awareness, the individual, is then rather disconnected from the real awareness that it is, and thinks that the personal self, the consciousness that has been developed, that effects the continuing simulated rollout, is what it actually is, whereas it is in fact just a vehicle for the real awareness in creation, and so the experiences are always generated. The overall simulator always the effects overall of the combined consciousness. The difference is that the real awareness connection is severed. The maintenance of the nowness position of its true reality and the it is a part of, lost. And as the real awareness always does what makes sense with the life and the environments it is in, the natural environments that are the expressed through creation, when this disconnect takes place and the personal selves are established and become lost in their own created illusions of simulation, the choices and decisions made, the ideas created that are added to the consciousness, that always affect the nature of them, generally are those that don't make sense with life, are personal self-serving, are very often destructive, and orientated toward sensation gratifying. And as all created ideas are in addition to this nowness, being-isness state, they are in fact a distortion, as anything other than just being is described as such, as it will produce effects as per the simulator's design, and additionally will the various ideas, the agreements to them, the emotional attachments to certain ideas, rather have each individual cling on to the consciousness of ideas they have formulated, as opposed to just experiencing, being in the nowness of the real awareness, as the experiential simulation rolls out, with the body forms that stemmed from the initial karmic package. For a holding to the ideas is the equivalent of having all the pages of every website you ever looked up on your computer simultaneously, and constantly added to as you continue, and into future lifetimes, as this overall attachment and agreement to the consciousness is maintained, and so all the ideas from every lifetime are still effectively on the computer screen, even though each lifetime around we now are unconscious of the presence of the idea files from all lifetimes prior to the current one. This has a huge burdening factor on the simulator through an overall consciousness that affects it, and so the simulator goes through its degradation cycles. And so ultimately we have the vast majority of beings in the simulator that are disconnected from their real awareness, that are clinging onto agreement and immersed in the consciousness they have created. Basically, they think their consciousness is what they are, and so, by that very consideration, are they in a constant agreement with it and its construction of lifetimes of ideas. Everything of it is on the screen, and overwhelming the overall computer, the simulator. Eventually is the idea that at a certain point, a reconnection to the real awareness is established. And now, with the two selves, the personal self and the real awareness, do we have the overall comparison. The personal self, with its endless experiences, all of which is simulated, to compare with and recognize the is by, which now can be achievable, as the real awareness connection is remade, the real awareness that is this isness, and only from the nowness of the real awareness, a position aside from the creations of the personal self, can the is be recognized, so all a necessary process. And when we speak of individuals being one-dimensional, it is that their focus is not only with the personal self, but the very densest part of creation that is effected from it, the physical life level, which is the stadium where everything generated through the personal self for bodies plays out in cause and effect simulation, but simultaneously also do all ideas, all thoughts, emotion and imagination play out and effect their respective life levels and simulation on the unseen dimensions of life, the astral through to the etheric. And the reason that most humans are oblivious of anything beyond the physical is that an overall force has not only taken control of the simulator, but has limited the species they control to ensure they are more manageable, has ensured the slave humans and other such species have their focus maintained and fixated on the physical level with all its phenomena, for awareness beyond the physical could lead to further inclination to be aware of more, and ultimately a situation where should all the slaves potentially reconnect with their real awarenesses, so this represents a potential retraction of agreement to the ideas the simulator controllers have got most to agree with, to have a simulator of their controlling design, rather a hijacking of overall consciousness that effects, through their controlling ideas installed, the controlled simulator overall that they desire. For to reconnect with the real awareness and to then return to the nowness of its true reality, and whatever the consciousness is constructed as, in this case as an overall support structure for the controllers, so this undermines their controlling positions, as agreement to the consciousness is retracted, and so the controllers surely want to keep everyone as unaware and unconscious and as one-dimensional and literal as possible, to have them focused on the physical and in agreement with what life is, as according to the reptilian simulator controllers. And so we can see that the simulated experiences we have are based on our decision, whatever ideas we activate, create, or agree with that others have created. These ideas will be placed in the consciousness that is the generator then of the corresponding effect experiences, and so nothing then is outside of our design, and everything then we are the architects of, as it so features in our experiences.
Let's open it up to the floor. Yeah, welcome.
I have thought of the issue of time and the relation of, and when you said, does anyone have any comment? I thought you said, does anyone have any karma they would like to share?
Well, actually, you can share it, but I'm not going to touch it. Sorry.
Oh, you're not going to take it on.
No.
It's not yours.
Misunderstood me. Yeah.
In reference to the Groundhog Day, which is a karmic teleplay, and a repeat, and the idea that history repeats is also involved here because of recent events that and books I've been alerted to that are talking about that this is all part of a historical repetition in the current events, COVID, etc. So that definitely relates. The Bill Murray character continually tries to tempt the lords of karma by crashing his car into a train, I guess it was, and or lighting himself on fire. If he did that, I don't remember, but he did all kinds of stuff to taunt the gods to see if they could get him, or he could beat them, or what have you. And he has a lot of fun with that, and of course that's a good part of the story. My notice about the time is 6 o'clock is the time that's always used. And I go, well, that's curious. You know, he could have done it 6:31 or 7 or whatever. And obviously, the lords of karma are hooked into the 6, or who's ever doing the manifestation of this. That's a question there, because we could say, well, is actually Bill Murray just doing it to himself? And he's creating his own simulation, return, experience, ad nauseum, in order to teach himself the moralities of his choices, and to reach also, I'll call it the exigency of his final judgment, which is to, I guess, quote unquote, something like marry the girl and become a nice guy and appreciate his life and have gratitude would be another one. Let me finish with a comment on the 6 o'clock, because 6 is a number that is used in a number of different ways. For one thing, there's a cycle of hours through the week that repeats every week, always starts at 6 o'clock, and each day is lined up with one of the solar planetary days, Jupiter, the moon, the sun, and Saturn, and so forth. And that cycle repeats over and over again every week, constantly. But also the 6 o'clock has to do with the 6 bodies in creation, more or less, I'll say, the 6-pointed star and the Star of David and all those things. And how that relates is this. I think in the creation worlds and the lords of karma and all of that is built on this thing that's also called the 6 degrees of separation. And you have to go through lifetimes of karma is another one, the Wheel of 84, but that doesn't directly relate here. But I know that in our spiritual studies, you'll find a lot of the teachings are focused on this getting through the wheel of karma and reaching the ultimate freedom beyond the circle of Groundhog days repeating every year in our life and in our day-to-day experience in the simulator. So the 6 is definitely lined up with that, and it's not a ploy or a play to have us reveal who is the lords of karma and what are they up to in this repetition in the simulator. That the lead character, Bill Murray keeps getting to play with and improving his real awareness till he finally dawns on him. And he doesn't get, though, one thing, I think, maybe this is for the ending, but something about him actually getting, hey, I don't have to keep repeating this. What am I doing? Why am I playing along with this? And, really getting the whole picture there, not just, I'm going to go along with it and then let's see what's going to happen. And maybe, I will see that it's got some kind of moral, personal revelation to bring him to his personal self aggrandizement, if you will. It really is about that. It's not about him becoming free of the simulator and the repeat karma in his real life. Yes, he might get through the Groundhog Day and survive one day that year, but I think they're doing a Groundhog Day too. I might jump and say, didn't I see something about that? Maybe, maybe not. So that's my simulation on this time theory. I remember we were reading the books on the Talons of Time and the Time Makers, and that's definitely something I touched on about whoever the Lords of Karma are and their intents and our new real valuations of all this. So
Thanks. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Well, it's kind of hard to psychoanalyze this thing, but it looks to me like the thing is the repeat of over and over and over the same problems. And it sort of looks like what we're going through.
Yeah, well, he had a chance to, step kind of, in one way, he stepped outside of the cause and effect, because anything he did didn't matter because the next day he'd be same day. But then again, each time he did something within that day, he could see that would cause there'd be a difference in the next day within himself. He learned something each time from it. Frustration, initially. Basically, he started to what he wants. He set up things that he wanted to do and gain and stuff. Then he went to be the do-gooder. He tried to help people. And then the final stage, he just kind of let it go and just accepted it. And that's where he kind of broke the spell. Basically, he was chasing this girl all the time, Andie MacDowell. But then he broke the spell by just being a real person kind of, and not being a good do-gooder, just doing what he did, what he could. And then that broke it. He woke up the next day and it was a different day. But he was still in cause and effect, but it gave him an opportunity to play around with this cause and effect thing and to show him certain things so he could recognize more. But again, he didn't ever recognize going outside of the cause and effect, but he played within that karmic field,
Well, where's the groundhog fit in this thing? That's what's the tie-in with it?
There could be something there, yeah. The big rat. I don't know. Anybody have any ideas on that? Well, if he comes out February 2nd, he sees his shadow, then there's going to be how many, 6 more weeks of winter or something. If he doesn't, spring is coming. And that's the literal side. But there could be something with Groundhog, yeah, with the whole thing here.
I know, maybe Kevin's got something he could add to it.
The name of the groundhog, the beaver, or whatever it was, had the same name as the individual, which was Phil. And so I think that was symbolic of representing almost like the two parts or two selves of the individual himself, because he, as the human version, that would obviously represent the personal self, the consciousness, and the simulated side. But with the groundhog being an animal, and as all animals are, they are connected directly to their real awareness, and they're in the nowness of the is. That would almost represent the two sides of his, the two parts of his being, the real awareness side and the personal created side. And so almost throughout the entirety of the movie was there almost as though the real awareness that he could always refer to, or always lean toward if he so wanted, almost as a constant hint throughout the entirety of the movie. So I looked at it more like that way. It was more symbolic of that, I think.
And you see how he started offing himself in different ways, electrocuting himself, driving off a cliff. So that's kind of like the real awareness doesn't care, in a way, about the personal self. So he's kind of, it gave him a chance to recognize that. Plus he became to think he was a god, not the god, he said, but God, because nothing can harm me, nothing can kill me. I wake up the same the next day, I still keep waking up. So that's kind of like, yeah, the personal self can be, you can do whatever, but you still wake up, or if you recognize what's going on here, you wake up in each lifetime and you're basically a viewpoint here. So he said he's a god, kind of referring to maybe he doesn't have any karma, but or he can do anything he wants within a certain framework, but still it's just interesting. This is an interesting movie, the way there's so much to it here. So maybe go ahead, Kevin.
Generally, the consciousness is just a program of ideas that runs very routinely. The personal self tends to pursue, focus on, and chase certain ideas that is favourable to it, and so sets rather a foundation of perpetuated patterns of very similar lifetime experiences, with the overall foundation being a controlled situation, as is the greater bulk of the underlying agreements in the subconscious, ensuring that whatever individual choices we make are done within the confines of a prison yard, a controlled matrix of a simulator. And so most people rather are on automatic, unconscious pilot, their personal awareness placed in the consciousness, in a total agreement with it, and it generates the experiences generally it always has, as we find ourselves walking into versions and variations, but the general same themes as according to our thrill-seeking preferences. If something completely different or new takes place, this can only be so if we have effected, through idea causes, situations that are entirely different, and this can be so if certain circumstances dictate that a change of idea insertion is required, and these can be upheavals or disruptions to what generally are mundane lifetimes of repetitive routine. This is why the controllers would preferably keep everything relatively the same. They wouldn't want anything to take place that might have the slaves consider or create ideas outside of a routine. As always, awareness of more can only be so if we activate ideas that are beyond the routines we have immersed ourselves in. To become aware of something else, we need effect experience that differs from that which we always have, as even the general run of thoughts and emotions will be very routine, as most will be generating thought and emotion in reaction to very routine experience, and only should circumstances change drastically to something never experienced before or seldomly, must this likely have reactions and considerations that likewise will be somewhat beyond the routine of those we usually produce. Very often it is the real awareness that has triggered change, for the personal awareness is content to sit asleep at the wheel of its consciousness vehicle, so to speak, and as life always seeks to have all real awareness recognize the ears, so will certain opportunities and windows be taken advantage of, especially for the stubborn one-dimensional unconscious individual, as sometimes they need a little nudge here and there. In regards to Phil, then, he would find himself locked in a perpetual cycle that would incorporate a single day, Groundhog Day. It's very possible that, this being the highly unusual situation as it is, that this was indeed orchestrated by his real awareness, that perhaps this was just the thing to shake up the personal self a bit, and even though Phil would ultimately settle back and return to his one-dimensional life again, nevertheless, certain ideas, considerations, etc., would have been created in response to his situation, and will project their nature into different effects he will at some stage experience, and be an aid to greater awareness. And as I said, if we project and create ideas outside of the routine of those we usually do in response to our routines of experience, then these must effect altogether different experience in some shape or form, and maybe Phil may not experience these even in his current lifetime, but who can say how his future lifetimes may have been changed from the routine they were likely to be to something now rather different, as a result of the mental and emotional ideas formulated in response to that which he went through. As I said, most people tend to be locked in patterns of routine, cycles of repetitive experience, lifetimes that follow along similar lines through a consciousness that remains relatively unchanged in its design. So for an individual to be locked in a day that repeats endlessly, really, this is not all that different from what Phil or anybody is generally doing anyway, from lifetime to a lifetime. But of course, each lifetime around, we have a new mental vehicle where our previous lifetimes of experiences are not available, as they rather become transferred to other storage areas of the personal self, and are the subconscious then, that which we are unconscious of, until we go about the process of facing the self and releasing all the agreements of the consciousness. As the deciders of our experience, we always effect what we focus on, where we place our attention. Creation always reflects the ideas we agree with and create. As such, we can experience anything we want in creation, assuming there are no conflicting ideas in the subconscious that present as obstacles to doing so. And many times we may be unconscious of the effects we are generating as we go through our lives, as we chase ideas, as we fixate on certain things, as we don't realize that every idea carries a cause and effect component to it. People who are obsessed with certain games or game themes may not realize how they are very likely projecting themselves into such situations and future lifetimes accordingly. For example, it's very possible then that at some point Phil decided on, agreed with, focused and placed his attention with a particular idea, even from lifetimes prior to his current one, that manifested in he being locked into a perpetually repeating day. For it did seem that his fixation was with the other lead woman in the movie, and indeed his every endeavour, as he repeated each day, was to refine his methods and tactics for winning her over, and ultimately he would be successful. Can it be a case then of an infatuation with another individual, of unrequited love, where his efforts had always, throughout lifetimes, met with a failure, and so this obsession would culminate in a situation where he was afforded an opportunity to finally claim her? A case then of an individual going to whatever extreme measures are required to secure that which he desires, and again he very likely wouldn't have realized how such obsessive wants could well effect into such scenarios, and then in another lifetime would suddenly walk into that which he had created for himself. For many times in such movies, these Groundhog Day scenarios of cyclical loops of days or periods of time that individuals are trapped within, tend to afford the opportunity to change something that is overall far more beneficial for all involved. Although in reality Nothing can go right or wrong. It is all just decision and cause and effect. And if individuals do find themselves in such circumstances, it is through their deciding, their choices, that they have found themselves there, and what they do with such opportunities is again their choice to make.
What do you think it would be like if he had accomplished everything that he wanted? What do you think it would be like at the end? Would he be so bored? Would he be with boredom?
Okay, what do you mean by accomplished everything in one day? Because he wakes up to a new day every time it's different. So you mean in one
No,
day?
I'm saying what happens if he finally gets through all of it, and he's finally at the end, and he's accomplished everything he's ever wanted to accomplish. What do we think it'd be like at the very end? Boredom? I don't know. I'm trying to think of what it would be like if you finally finished all of this and you got all of this negative stuff behind you. Yeah, and you're finally swimming in all of this positive stuff.
That's where the elites are. They're bored. They're just got everything they want, and they're bored, so they try to start doing funny things. So they can either keep doing that or find the real guides and get out of here.
That's what it's all about. Get out of it and get above it.
But we still need the matrix in a way. We need the creation. Otherwise, we're in that. We're just aware. We don't. But we're aware of what? We're not aware of anything. We're just aware in this soup of whatever. This isness. But creation gives us opportunity to see what we're aware of by providing something that's not real and that's not not real. So in that way we can see where we are. We gain awareness. Otherwise we're just aware.
Well, we've been through it all.
There's nothing to be aware.
If you take all our lifetimes that we have behind us, we know it all. We just don't remember it.
Yeah.
And then what it's about, trying to remember.
Well, that's a personal self and its experiences throughout the creation world. It's a simulator. But we want to get beyond that. You could say beyond that, but it's just whatever is, we want to recognize that. And so
I will often wonder what it's like if you finally get to the seventh heaven, you're in the positive worlds. You're still going to be influenced by the negative worlds because your bodies are still in it.
Yeah, if you kept your bodies, kept your,
Well, I figure you'd have to if you're going to be here on Earth. It gets complicated.
Well, not really. It's very simple, but we make it complicated, by using our minds, in a way that makes it complicated. But actually, it's with awareness. It's just an isness. So you're just aware. But what are you aware of? That's where we're pointing people to this recognition of how do you want to be aware of this isness? It's your choice, your decision, how you want to be aware of it, how you want to see it. It's not like it's one thing for everybody, one heavenly thing for everybody to see, whatever, but everybody has their own take on this reality. That's what's so cool about it, because it's so individual, it's so unique to each one of us. And we have as we get through the matrix, you could say this simulator, we can see it for what it is in our own way. And it's so vast and huge that there's no way you can see it all. So we just see, each one of us sees it a different way. And then we share with each other, what we see, like Kevin's in The Great Witness. He's sharing what he sees, and then we benefit from that. We get other viewpoints. So we kind of like take each other's viewpoints and see a bigger picture of it all. Go ahead, Kevin.
Every idea decided has its effect, and so the simulation has changed with every new idea created. As we all share the overall simulation, as the overall consciousness affects it, so must each individual idea effect then a change in the overall simulator that all within then experience, like making little adjustments to your computer game, but a computer game shared by all, and so these adjustments impact their simulation also. This is in fact then the passage of so-called time, that an idea then produces an effect, but not immediately as per the mechanics of decided consciousness. If I throw a stone, it takes a time to reach its target and do its damage. In reality, the effect is instantly so, but on the physical, we have additional, decided upon laws of limitation that have somewhat a delay factor from cause to effect, from stone thrown to stone impact, and so, because of these cause to effect mechanics, every single individual idea must change then the simulator it effects into, and we have then, in fact, endless pockets of encapsulated simulators, like endless bubbles or dimensions, versions of the same simulator that encapsulate the overall consciousness as it is at each moment. And then, as another idea is generated and created, so must another entire simulator bubble be effected through the real awareness, which is through all consciousness, and therefore all simulation that effects from it. Can any view be afforded from any position, any vehicle in the simulators, irrespective of so-called time, and we can, through awareness, view entire simulator bubbles as they were, but really as they in fact are, as everything is, according to overall the consciousness of ideas that effected into them. And this could well be construed as a time travel, but really we are simply viewing the simulator according to the ideas that were in the consciousness that effected it at certain moments. Everything is the culmination of itself. But if the consciousness overall is effecting the simulator as it currently stands, then every idea that has been added to every consciousness to make the consciousness overall what it is now must also be generating a complete simulator effecting from each individual idea in each consciousness construction that spins off into a simulator bubble accordingly, all also in this nowness moment of the real awareness, and all accessible, and all can be then viewable. If the consciousness now is the sum of its parts, the sum of its ideas that have brought it to the state it is now, with the corresponding simulator, then every bubble simulator that stems from every idea decided along the line, if changed, must then ultimately culminate in a changed current simulator that is the culmination point. And so, if we are able to view these series of simulator pocket dimensions that have led to the current moment, that's one thing. But if we were able to be a simulated part of them and cause alterations, these are in fact changing the ideas, which must then ripple through and change the culmination final current simulator. Hence why only with personal selves that are trusted will the real awareness and the guides allow the personal self to feature in the actual simulation and on occasion to effect change that ripples through the dimensional bubbles to the current simulator moment, if it makes sense and is a benefit for all life to do so. For the dark forces lack this real awareness connection to allow such to view or to insert their personal selves into these prior simulator bubbles, as of course they would seek to effect ripples of alteration that were for destructive and controlling purposes, and so they have resorted to technology, which, although crude and dangerous, and potentially hazardous with disastrous potentialities, can they effectively go back through time, in a sense, to access these other simulator bubbles to cause alterations that must then ripple through to the current simulator. But again, we always experience what we decide, and as I said, it's not impossible that an individual can find himself returning to the same day, or what would be the same bubble simulator continuously, absent of real awareness or technology to facilitate such. And indeed, we could see that if his actions, if his interactions, if his words remained the same, his dialogue with the other participants, then so their responses, their actions, would remain equally the same for every time he restarted the day. But as he chose differently, so would the reactions, the conversations generated in response from others, be different. He had then changed the ideas that feed into the consciousness, that effect overall, into the simulator, by the very slightest of changes he caused through his altered actions. So had this elicited altered changes from others, and so these would be ripples of altered ideas of causality that would culminate in a simulator as it currently is, being changed. The fact that he kept returning to the same point and causing different idea creations would have then constant change to the overall simulator, and so somewhat reckless, but then he wouldn't have realized the mechanics and ramifications for his cause to effect alterations. It's very possible that individuals can have their awareness moved through dimensions, even into different consciousness body vehicles, but what tends to happen is what your awareness is inserted into, it rather becomes, as the personal self, absent of the real awareness connection, can only be that which its consciousness is. Imagine you as the real awareness, and you have two different computer games and computer game characters with each. From your perspective as the real awareness, you are aware of both of the games, both of the characters, and regardless of which game you play or character, you have awareness of the other also, as indeed the real awareness has complete awareness of everything creational, every game simulated and character that plays within them. But the personal self is locked into the game. All it has is what the game and the character and its consciousness comprises of. And if you then move the personal awareness to the other game, then it simply is locked into only that game, consciousness and simulation, with no recollection of the other. For recollection of one game can only be so through the memory vehicles of the character that affects the simulated game it is in. And so, if you take the personal awareness from that consciousness, you are removing it from that memory vehicle. And when you insert it in the other game, naturally then it has no memory of the previous game, only access to the consciousness and memory references that effect into its current game. So for an individual like Phil to be returned to the starting point of the same day perpetually, realistically, it's unlikely he would have a memory of having lived the day before, because effectively his personal awareness had been removed from one consciousness vehicle that effects into one simulator bubble and moved into another consciousness vehicle at a moment where all that had transpired from the moment he woke up previously can't be available as references or memory in the body vehicle he now is within. With the dark forces and their technological time operations, or bubble simulator traversing, they are not so much displacing awareness through consciousness vehicles as they are placing themselves directly into a previous simulator bubble dimensions. Their consciousness vehicle as it currently stands. Or the same issue would apply, that of no memory retained regarding their objective. Super soldiers, for example, have their awareness moved to alternative consciousnesses to carry out various missions, and they also have no recollection of this being so, for again, memories of events are only available through the consciousness vehicles that experienced such events. A completely different consciousness would not have such memories. And so, to be fully aware of restarting a day each time, such awareness can only be afforded from that which is aside from the consciousness, and that would be the real awareness. and indeed some super soldiers do have memories of their missions that simply couldn't be in the consciousness they have been returned to. So this must be more so insight from their real awareness, regardless of if they realized this was the source of their recollection or not. And we could see examples of why generally the real awareness, the guides, will not facilitate an individual's personal self to not only enter other dimensional bubble simulators from what we would construe as the past, but be in a position to alter the ideas of them, as Phil would become reckless in his activities, even be interfering in what were decided causes set in motion by others, people falling from trees, the elderly man having a heart attack, all of which are what these individuals had in reality decided to experience through the choices they had made. And to intervene is really then taking on the karma for yourself. It is a power position of intervening in what are the decisions of others, that as we do so, we can take on these effects. Healers, as an example, are shouldering the karma, the effects of what the ill and the inflicted have decided to experience, and consequently very often the healers will become very ill themselves, as all effects must be experienced, and they rather are transferring these effects to their own game, like transferring a file from another's game to your own. And we can see also that as Phil's behaviour becomes reckless, this rather was due to the boredom of the repetitiveness of the perpetual day, rather a microcosm of the greater situation with the simulator, as indeed when individuals become bored, so do they seek to alleviate their boredom by any means necessary. They become unruly, destructive, and eventually we see this expressed as the controllers dominating the entire simulator and blowing up planets for their amusement. And usually death would have us moved to the next position, which really is simply the position we have decided for ourselves, as everything must be. We decide our death. We decide the position that follows. And it's not an impossible scenario for an individual in Phil's situation that as he attempts suicide, instead of a transition to the astral, the general automatic position for most, he just pops right back to the start of the day. Again, this must be through his decision that this be so. So adamant is he to be retained in this perpetual loop, effected very likely without a conscious realization he was doing so, as I said, and very likely based on the singular objective to win the affections of the woman. As when he succeeded, so did the repeating day loop come to its conclusion, And maybe we can also look at this whole situation this way, that lessons we fail to grasp or learn tend to need be repeated until they are. Cause and effect creation does rather provide its own justice system, so to speak, in that whatever we decide, so do we experience. And if our deeds and actions are destructive, so will we be met by equally as abrasive experience circumstances and dire life positions. And even though unconscious of every lifetime but our current one in regards to the experiences of it, everything we have experienced will be subconsciously housed and will still affect our behaviour. For as the rebel bucks the controller's systems, for example, as he, say, gets tortured and killed for doing so, the next lifetime around, less likely will he be inclined toward a similar controller insurrection, as despite having no conscious memory of his death due to his rebellion, subconscious stirrings will hold him back from being so inclined again. And the same applies to how, as we are brutish, as we are imposing on others, as we then have unsavoury experience that reflects such choices, this must then present subconscious stirrings that cause resistance to repeating such decided behaviour again. In a sense, then, the simulator and its cause and effect nature rather leans toward the policing of itself, in that all will slowly, gradually make more so better choices that are supporting of life, and if the lessons aren't learned, if we don't learn from mistakes, poor life choices and decisions, we tend to find ourselves in the same situations and reflected circumstances, and cycle endlessly until we do extricate ourselves from the positions in life we have sunk to. And so perhaps we can look at Phil's situation as rather the evolution of being a selfish, self-serving individual through to being one that cared more so for others, that then supported life in all its forms, and that he made amendments to his decided attitudes that were less destructive. And yes, regardless of what we decide, we are still the effects of. We can be saintly or ill-intended, the hero or the villain, but the effects of ourselves, our decided ideas, we will be. But were we to be deciding to remain in creation, far better would it be to be so in less destructive ways, that we have less abrasive karma to have to work through and deal with, and a better refined attitude through the personal self can only be beneficial for when it comes to that moment when we decide to connect with the real awareness and recognize the ease, as the attitudes of sincerity, integrity, honourability, and gratitude are those that align the personal self best with the real awareness intent. And should we take on the process of awareness, but have come at it with embraced attitudes that are not so well aligning, then this will add additional obstacles that we must also overcome.
Yeah, we can have a better creation here. The thing is, most people think that's the end all. Heaven, that's the end of it, the conclusion. But it's just a place. It's just a reference to work off of. So we can have a better creation, better, work and support with the natural environment, but keep going. I mean, that's the thing. We keep going. It's not like it's going to be the end and happily ever after. So most people are like that. They think creation is for that reason, kind of to reach a conclusion. But no, it's here for us to reference, use as a reference, as a tool to compare. And we can have a better creation, that we don't have to, we basically, we go on, we want to be the adventuresome type.
What's the symbolic of the woman?
Of the woman?
Yeah, is she the prize? Where does she psychologically fit into this realm?
Well,
that's what I'm trying to figure out. What is she supposed to be?
The realm or the movie?
Well, within the movie, is she the prize?
Well,
It's why he keeps repeating himself over and over and over. Isn't that symbolic of the reincarnation? Over and over and over, making the same mistakes.
Yeah, it's symbolic of what most people here are about. Boy meets girl. And he tried different girlfriends in the movie. It didn't work out until he finally came to her, and the producer of the TV news show. And then he started hitting on her and trying to figure out how to get her to agree to him.
So what's the fast track? How do we get out of it real quick and not fall back into it? What's the secret?
You tell us.
Well, I think the secret is simply being in the, instead of having the negative and positive forces continually fighting each other and bouncing off each other. The secret is to get into the neutral plane. Neutral. You're above the negative and positive carnation.
Okay, tell us how that goes.
Karma.
Okay.
The karma is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So in order way to finally be above the karma and stabilize yourself into the neutral zone, you never create karma.
No, it's good. Whatever, whatever works for you. I mean,
well, I'm trying to figure out how to beat the damn system, because it keeps dragging you back in. So there's something, a combination of something that you finally beat the system. And that's the only way I can see it. Don't let it keep dragging you back in.
Creation is here for a reason, and the bad guys are here. They're doing good in a way because they're helping us motivate people to move their butts. Otherwise, they're happy and go lucky and don't care about waking up. They're just happy in their la-la land. They're not
critical
really
for us knowing what's going on, how to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The fighting, the battling back and forth between the negative and positive forces.
It just appears to me it's gone too much now, so that's why the guides are intervening more, or they're stepping it up so people have a more opportunity to wake up, because creation simulator is being destroyed, so now it's like they're being upped the opportunities. Because otherwise there'll be a new creation, everybody forget where they were and they start all over again. Seems to be the way it works.
Today, on my Groundhog Day today, I woke up with the War of the Worlds 1953. on the, I've got this sci-fi or channels come on automatically, and whatever's there, you know, sometimes it's interesting. I had The Prisoner about 2 weeks ago, which is very interesting. But I'll put War in the Worlds here and a number of other movies that were related to time travel, of which there are many in different forms. The Groundhog Day is unique in the sense of just repeating one day over rather than going way back in the past and changing the past and seeing if that's going to change change the future or the present, because the past got changed and altered. And this whole concepts are very, very common and numerous. This Groundhog Day idea made me think, you know, each day we could say, in our Groundhog Day. Are we going to wake up completely? We have one day to do it. Otherwise, you're going to have to come back and do it again. The same idea is very conceptually related. The 5 themes that I noticed from this movie that I looked it up were marriage, love, something related to karma, time, and I guess partnerships and relationships was another list on the list. I forgot if I got all 5 right. Doesn't matter. Those are how the common, let's say, psychological community will interpret this movie and express it and share it. Now, we'll come along here and go, okay, we might mention time, or we might mention karma, or we might mention relationships and love and morals. Those are the 5 themes. But we're not talking about morality play and how to be good people. And we're not talking about time in terms of how it may control us or how we can become free of the time restraints that we're under. As in all of these topics, we are not really talking about them from that human, physical perspective, one-dimensional perspective. This is a whole nother field. Anyway, one other thing to share about that is my own relation in time in terms of understanding the story or how the story works, because he is given many different days to adjust. And if I was like to say right here, trying to make a review of all the sci-fi movies and have them all in my head and be able to communicate very clearly and succinctly in a short amount of time what those themes and avenues and realities are, I couldn't do that because you know, my memory is not as sharp as it was, etc. But you know, as we're reading Kevin's reading there, the writings that he's reading from are able to be composed over a period of time, but when they're presented here by Kevin, he does, you know, it's already in a whole conscious, observable position to reveal. And yeah, I'm trying to do that in my comments, which is to consolidate this value of our whole understanding, that is recognizing the is, which is the real goal of every day. In fact, our Groundhog Day is to revelize on that. And I will say, some days I wake up, you know, and I go, wow, I mean, I'm really illuminated when I wake up. And I'm ready for that whole day from a very illuminated position, but it doesn't last all day. So one of my, you know, the personal avenue here for the Bill Murray character, yeah, can I get through the whole day and continue to keep in the real awareness and not, whatever objectivity that takes over. And usually, more than likely, by the end of the day, it's definitely not as sharp. Or, I'm just trying to describe, how each day has its differences and lessons that we're pulling in. And we get to this goal, which is, or we're working at this goal, recognize the is, period. And then if we have to come back in other lifetimes or other days, okay, we're going to continue learning. It's a continuousness. And it doesn't end at the end of that day or whatever. Revelation comes, It's not revelation and then, okay, now you're in heaven with God and Jesus and, that kind of thing. So War of the Worlds was the sci-fi where the aliens come from Mars, they blow up everything, and the only thing that's left are the beings and the humans and the mammals, but mostly they're not in the cities, and all that was all wiped out, which sounds like a pretty good thing. And what happens at the end is the virus kills all of them, the aliens, the virus, or bacteria here, common cold. And this was 1953. I go, oh, okay, obviously it doesn't dawn on the dumbest of people to make a revelation with that and COVID, et cetera, and how they propagandized it and propagated the whole social context in the simulator through all these events that transpired through history to come down to this particular one that we're experiencing in this century. It's just another Groundhog Day, really, for humanity in one sense, or civilizations. And yeah, it seemed to me like, it wouldn't be so bad to get rid of all the city and all the cultural and all that. And now we're back on step one again. And I definitely wanted to share about that interrelated context within this. And so I think I covered it pretty good. Thank you, Val.
Thank you.
Appreciate all of you guys.
And just a few tidbits here. Kevin, you talked about the animals and their real awareness. So the groundhog, once he was driving, one of his days, he was driving the truck. I think that's when he drove over the cliff. The groundhog was steering, he was in front, Bill was in back there. But he was having the groundhog steer the truck, basically. And that was his real awareness that taking over, but his personal self, him, was just still in the back there, driving the real awareness. I just thought that was kind of a little tidbit. And then I think that's when they went over the cliff, maybe. That's when they both went over the cliff.
Yeah,
Well,
now I got to interrupt you by saying, what about that Groundhog Day? What about Phil, the groundhog? I mean, really, give him some credit here.
Well, I'm saying he's the real awareness. He represents the real awareness, yeah. And Phil put him in, or Bill Murray put him in the front drive. He was the driver, of the truck. But he was in the back still like influencing him and pushing him, and they went over the cliff. Another one was every time he woke up, he'd be under the covers, he'd wake up. That's like, our real awareness is we're just a point of view, just like, yeah. And then he turns over and it's Sonny and Cher. There might be something to that. I Got You, Babe. That song by Sonny and Cher plays, and it's at 6 o'clock. It's a song too, could be something with that, Peter. But then he becomes literal right away. He's just point of view when he wakes, he's just up, but then he turns and then everything changes. He goes back into the simulator, basically. There's this little thing. And then also each time you could say each day he goes and sees how people react by what he does. That could be like us going on the real side and seeing how people really are, or how they you know, in a way, it kind of represents going on the real side, because you know they're not going to remember, and most people don't remember what happens, you know, on the real side. So he has this opportunity to go there, see people's reactions, and come back, and then the next day, you know, next day he has this recognition or awareness. I mean, awareness of how you know they are, how they respond, how they react to things. So that's kind of represents us going to the real side and seeing how they really are, and we can bring it back and be aware of people, see their real intentions, etc. And Mac, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm just kind of trying to just, you know, working with
That's
some
good,
ideas.
Val.
Some ideas.
Your thought about the "I got you, babe." It was definitely like the karmic power, you know, that he had to choose destinies with the people, such as the woman, Andie MacDowell, and it relates also to "I got you, babe" as the tap lining. It pulled him right in. There you go. That's his tap line that's keeping him in the loop.
That's right. Very good. Very good. I got you. That's right. Okay, before we end, Tim, do you have anything else? Did you see the movie? You have any comments?
I remember it a little, yeah. Yeah, it's all interesting. How if we've always been and always will be, then it's the same thing. This thing called time is always just now. So maybe we come back, what we would call some time in the future to guide ourselves. If we have the education then to guide this self now out of not having to keep doing the same stuff over and over. It's pretty simple. That people eat and sleep and over and over and over and over. That's just this physical stuff. So I guess there are ways that we do actually act like that groundhog, returning over and over to.
Kevin, in the experience you have with the black potential president, didn't you have a section there where the real guides or Dwayne went back and saw him in a past life, kind of prompted him, something like that? Can you kind of go over that? Do you remember that part?
That didn't happen in that experience. Dwayne didn't go back and speak to this individual. I just included some of the similar activities that Dwayne had been a part of, that he mentioned in his new books, where he had gone back and approached certain individuals, and that with the possibility that if he can go back to a point before they became the ruthless controller tyrants that they are now, that there's a possibility he can perhaps get them to make different life choices and decisions, which would then ripple through to the current situation, in which perhaps it would affect change that would be beneficial to all life and awareness. But I only made mention of Dwayne, and that simply because he and the guides had been doing sort of similar type activities. Because in that experience, I had the notion that it was more a case that I was doing something along similar lines, going back to a point where an individual, where it was at a moment before the individual would attain a position of political influence. And so it's the individual himself was black, and so it wasn't Obama, but it may have been some person who perhaps didn't aspire to being a president, but maybe still claimed a position of political influence and may be in that position now. And so I had more the impression it was along those efforts.
Yeah, and that's what Bill Murray, he finally found the trigger for this girl. So when he did, he influenced her to where, you know, he through many trial and error moments, he triggered her response to, have her agree to his advances. And then once he got the agreement, the next day he woke up and he had her agreement and everything changed. So it's kind of like that. I could see. Thanks, Kevin, for spending all the time setting it up for these shows. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. New you. Ronald?
New you.
Tim?
New you.
And Kevin?
You.